Good afternoon and welcome to our Wednesday lunchtime reflection. Today I will be thinking about seeing immigrants, which is number 4 of our Lent reflections. And for those of us in the building, it will be followed by a discussion over tea and coffee downstairs if you would like to join us. So thinking about seeing immigrants, my sister-in-law was walking with a friend along the seafront in Leith, near Edinburgh. She and a friend were merrily walking along the seafront, enjoying the beach and the sea, when someone shouted at them, "Go back home! Go back to where you came from!" It was quite upsetting for them to be shouted and harassed in this way. And the guy then followed them along the way. I said to her afterwards, "Did you not want to call the police?" And she was like, "Well, what are the police going to do? This happens all the time." And I wondered, and I assume she also wondered, where the assailant meant when he said, "Go back home." She grew up in Maidenhead. Maidenhead is near London. I'm not sure that's what he had in mind. But the friend she was with, well, he grew up in Palestine. And so going home to Palestine was not top of his agenda for that week. I'm sure he would have loved to return, but it wasn't safe for him. In this global world, I'm not sure that go back to where you came from really makes any sense. But it is nevertheless one of the most basic ways we have of understanding the world. Where do you come from? Where did you grow up? Where are your family from? The ground beneath our feet is, for many of us, an important part of our identity. The place where we grew up is an important part of how we see ourselves. Whether we have moved around the world or whether we have stayed in one place. It can't be denied that it is an important sense of identity, or it can give people an important sense of identity. But it's also an identity that goes over generations. My friend Adam was always pleased to say that he'd researched his family tree and he could go back 9 generations in Norfolk. Wow, 9 generations in Norfolk. I myself am first generation Norfolk, or maybe not even that. I'm an immigrant to Norfolk. It's funny how these generational things make us feel different or special. It's worth reflecting on. But we undoubtedly live in a global world. There is no way to avoid the fact that we live in a global community. We care about international disasters. We have been shocked to see the effects of the earthquake in Myanmar. We care about other people in other countries. We worry about the effect of the trade wars that are blowing up around us as Donald Trump imposes tariffs on other countries. That will have an immediate effect on us here, for good or for bad, but it will have an effect. And we are surrounded by both products and people from other countries. And just writing that sentence made me think, I wonder if we sometimes get mixed up between products and people, and we treat people like products and products like people. That might be worth thinking about. In a recent media spat between the Diocese of Norwich and the Telegraph, amongst other newspapers, the diocese was accused of wasting money on an anti-racism toolkit, with the argument that Norfolk is 95% white, so why on earth should we have an anti-racism toolkit? There are many answers to that question, one being that if Norfolk is 95% white, then we probably do need to think carefully about how we support those 5% who are not white, and perhaps an anti-racism toolkit would help in that. Another argument is that although Norfolk is 95% white, 178 different languages are spoken in the county's schools. 178 different languages. That's 1 in 8 of all the children in Norfolk schools have an additional language, whether it's a first language or a second language. That English is not their first language. So migration is high in Norfolk. I don't know what high means, but we have migration in Norfolk. It's absolutely a fact of life. And so when we think about it, we're not thinking about, is migration a good thing or a bad thing? We're thinking, there is migration. What is my response? And that's all we can do. We can't stop migration. What's available to us is how we respond. And some people respond by saying, well, we need to preserve British values. And that is worth thinking about. Although there doesn't seem to be much consensus about what British values are. And so then sometimes it morphs into preserving our way of life. Which again is a bit like, well, what is our way of life? Although I do think from a positive perspective, it's really important to think about what my values are and which of those values I want to retain in relationship with other people with different values. I don't want to get into this is a British value and this is a non-British value, or this is our values and that's their values. But we should personally reflect about what values are important to me and how do I hold on to those values in conversation with people of different values, whether they're from another country or from this country. Values are important, but sweeping statements about British values can often be meaningless. So I guess for me, what are the values I want to hold on to? Well, I come back again to love, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control. They're the kind of values that I want to hold on to. I'm not saying they're British values, but they are values that are worth holding on to and reflecting on how do I express those values in a multi-ethnic world, in a world where there is migration. And then I think the second way to think about how do we live in a world of migration is to understand our own experience of migration, and specifically our own experience of being migrants. I would be surprised if any of us here are more than 4 generations away, and this is just a guess, but I would be surprised if any of us were more than 4 generations away from being a migrant, either looking backwards in time. So, for example, I'm a migrant from Scotland to England. My grandfather was a migrant from Ireland to Scotland. My father-in-law was a migrant from Iraq to England. My sister is a migrant from Scotland to Australia. And looking forward, where will my children go to? Will they be migrants from England? Maybe to Spain? Maybe to Australia? It's likely that my children or my grandchildren will be migrants to another country. Socially and historically, we are children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of migrants, and we are very likely to be grandparents or parents or aunties and uncles to migrants, because that's the kind of world we live in. And as Christians, we call ourselves a pilgrim people. We reflect on the importance of taking our identity, not only from the Old Testament stories of migration, forced migration, a search for land, but also from the New Testament New Testament, which insists that our primary identity should not be the ground beneath our feet, but our primary identity should be as children of God, neither Jew nor Greek, neither from one country or another. Jesus insists that we give up those boundaries in favour of having identity as Jesus' people. We also, as Christians, owe our faith to migrants, to countless migrant missionaries who brought Christianity to this country from Europe or from Ireland. It's worth remembering that as we take communion, one of the prayers before communion includes the line, well, something like the line, God, gather your people from the ends of the earth. Sometimes I think that God is gathering people to us in the centre of the world, but we need to remember that we are the people at the ends of the earth being gathered into God's people. People are not being gathered to us, we are being gathered from the ends of the earth to centre our lives around Jesus. So we need to think about our identity first in God rather than based on the ground under our feet. And we need to seek to be migrants, travelling together towards God's kingdom. Amen. And everybody is welcome to join us downstairs for a discussion on the theme of seeing immigrants, and tea and coffee if you'd like it.